issues, not just social, physical, financial, but the reality is that sometimes we as human beings, we just cannot cope because there's so much hopelessness, there's so much crime and so many things we are bombarded with each and every day. And you know, as the guy was doing the mime, loving me, it all begins with yourself. You have to learn to love yourself for who you are. And yes, we may not be the sharpest tool in the shed, we may not be the brightest star, but you are loved. You are fearfully and wonderfully made by God, and you are special. Each and every one of us in this room, you have value. Your life is worth living. And I'd just like to thank you guys, for being here with us this evening. Even though we may be few in numbers, I commend you for taking the time out, to just be here and to learn and to grow and to have a better mental capacity of being able to grip what is really going on in our society, in our lives, in our homes, wherever we go. And now, you guys could sit back and relax. So we're going to have a dance now by Mrs. Anne-Marie Mohammed from the movie Bhuj, The Pride of India, dance called Ramo Ramo. For the 4 campuses of the University of the West Indies. He functions as the head of psychiatry and mental health services at the North Central Regional Health Authority, where he oversees and coordinates the inpatient and outpatient mental health services of the NCRHA, inclusive of the Stress Relief Center and Child and Adolescent Mental Health Clinic. He has authored or co-authored over 140 peer-reviewed academic publications, and his work has over 10,000 citations. He is the national representative of the International Association of Suicide Prevention. He serves on the Research Advisory Committee of the Caribbean Public Health Agency. He is also the co-principal investigator of the Intrepid Project, which compares the epidemiology of untreated mental illness in India, Nigeria, and Trinidad. His research interests are developmental studies, suicide, and first episode serious mental illness, psychosis. Professor, I do hope you get time to rest and relax with all these hats that you wear.
As given the Public Health Department to support this lecture, and I hope that I am able to maintain your interest for the duration of the lecture. I was here in 2015 doing this lecture as well, then invited by Jamil Mohammed, who is here. So it's also a privilege to be back to do it another time, and at that time it was quite interesting, and we had quite a interactive discussion. So I hope that the lecture will spawn some of that again. Interestingly, the subject then was about the evolution of mental health, and many of the same issues that we discussed then still apply, if not more so now. So in some ways there is overlap in terms of what I discussed then and what I'm going to talk about tonight. But the title tonight refers to, oh, and I should beg your indulgence for standing down here, but because of all the duties, I couldn't memorize the presentations. I have to have slides, and I don't have an assistant to move these slides for me, so I have to do it myself. So the idea is about violence prevention, injury prevention, and my argument is that mental health really is the key to that, and improving our mental health is the antidote to that whole process. And of course, understanding that means that you also will, in doing that, understand how mental health or mental health problems contribute to these problems that we face, which of course seem to be increasing in their severity. So definitions to start off with, and I always like to start here because when people talk about mental health, they often ask, well, what is it? And in some ways it defies definition. The World Health Organization says that there is no health without mental health. And when you look at their definition, you understand why they would say that. So they say there are four essential components. One is the ability to optimize your capacity, optimize the skills, optimize the potential that you have in a way that allows you to feel fulfilled. Secondly, that you're able to learn or work or do whatever you do productively, which of course kind of ties in with the first one. Thirdly, to be able to cope with the day-to-day stressors that life might provide. Again, as one of the earlier speakers mentioned, the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, would be, I guess, considered not a day-to-day stressor, and as a result, coping and trying to deal with it in all its manifestations created a lot of mental health difficulties. And the fourth element is also very interesting. It talks about being able to contribute to a community. And in that definition, those elements, it underlines three things. One, that you need to be able to understand yourself well enough to know how to optimize the potential that you have. Two, that in doing that, you will be productive, and in being productive, you will be able to withstand the day-to-day stresses that might seek to challenge that productivity. But most importantly for me is that it underlines the idea that you are part of a community, and that membership in a community is central to the idea of mental health. In other words, mental health is not only an individual thing, it's also a collective thing. And the mental health of your community and your individual mental health engage in a two-way conversation all the time. And of course, going back to the pandemic, that was why the pandemic created so much mental health difficulties. And to our subject tonight, why the issue of crime, violence, creates difficulties for people in the context of their mental health, both in terms of the trauma that you are exposed to, but also what it reflects about the society that you're part of and the communities that you're part of. So the mechanisms that are thought to inform that belong in four categories. Material, this would be physical structures that are important for your life, things like water supply, pollution, nutrition. Then the psychosocial, social inequality and that community issue again. Control over your life choices, exposure models. We talked about trauma and violence just now. And of course the structural things, access to care, means to engage in healthy lifestyles. So these components, and again, if you look at all of them, none of them directly mention mental health, but all of them inform the nurturing of health, which in turn nurtures your mental health. So the United Nations Development Program says that human development requires the expansion of choices in order that one can live a healthy, productive, and fulfilling life. And when you look at life being healthy and being productive, we go back to the definition of mental health. There's a very fascinating economist, Indian economist called Amartya Sen, and his work spoke to the idea that capability development was the purpose of life, meaning that again you needed to understand what your capabilities were, and your life work was about expressing those capabilities. He once famously said that poverty was not about money, but about capability deprivation. And his work informed the United Nations setting up what they call the Human Development Index, which is more than just about GDP, but measures things like literacy and life expectancy and a range of other health-related constructs, all of which contribute to mental health. So, in saying that, I'm saying that mental health ultimately is about capability. That ability to reach one's potential, that idea of having purpose and meaning, which is the productivity and the ability to deal with stressors and the capacity to engage in community interaction and reciprocal support. And we come back to this idea of community to support a lot, particularly when we're talking about strategies for prevention. But again, you see, there's that repetition of these elements of mental health. So, to the problems now. So this comes out to the London Guardian, and article is saying that the Caribbean island of Trinidad was grappling with a national crisis of violence. And they quoted from the World Population Review, which said that we had the 6th highest crime rate in the world. We are struggling with the issues related to reducing these rates, the influence of gangs, drugs, economic recession, overburdened legal system, great demand for weapons, drug trafficking, gang-related activities, all fueling this. Interestingly, so I looked up the reference at this World Population Review to look at who else was in the top 10. Venezuela is at number 1 actually, Guyana is at number 7, and Jamaica is at number 9. So it's interesting that in this top 10 you have 3 Caribbean countries, Jamaica, Guyana, and ourselves, and of course at number 1 our neighbors, Venezuela. So of course that begs a big question, how come? Why is there so much violence in this region? I have a theory about trauma that informs that. But seeing that the focus of the discussion today is about Trinidad, I won't go into that trauma theory that I have. And then today in the news there, I read this. A guy went to St. Anne's, and he and a friend was standing outside a bar on St. Anne's Road, and you see the time, it's 5:30 in the afternoon. A black Nissan X-Trail came up, two men got out and opened fire on the group of men lining at the bar. Both of them, the two guys that died, were shot, and one died on the roadway and the other died at the Hollis General Hospital. And I will argue that that is a mental health issue, because somebody who could get out of a car and shoot people wantonly in that way, whether they were paid, whether they were enacting revenge, whether they were having a bad day and decided to punish somebody for it, that means that there's something going on with their mental health. And it is something that we have to acknowledge, that this crisis of violence, to use the Guardian headline, I think is really a mental health crisis. And it's the mental health of young people especially, and the society more broadly, because I think that, going back to that whole community definition, the people who are able to do things like that have come out of a community, and somewhere along the line our communities have failed them. And a lot of what I talk about is kind of related to that, because I think that failure comes out of our inability to acknowledge their mental health issues, as well as the failures of the education system. Another dimension of violence is the epidemic of violence against women. Again, international media talking about criminal activity and violence against women have reached a dangerous height, written in 2022. And both UNESCO and UNICEF have written reports, extensive reports, not just in Trinidad, but again in the wider Caribbean, about this issue of intimate partner violence. One of the interesting things about those reports is that the violence is not just, it's predominantly perpetrated against women, but it's also intimate partner violence perpetrated against men. And while international data, which again reflects that it is an international problem, suggests that 1 in 3 women have experienced some kind of violence at some point in their life, the data from the Caribbean suggests it's 1 in 2. So it means, again, there is an issue. And again, the question is, why is there an issue? And then there's school violence. Again, this is the Ministry of Education, a report this year where they identified 16 schools that exhibit extremely high reports of school violence, and they identified the characteristics of those schools. High percentage of Form 1 students who scored under 13 in the SCA exam, high levels of indiscipline, high absenteeism, and in higher levels, low levels of CSEC achievement. And they said at least 7 of the schools show all the characteristics. So in other words, the ministry is suggesting that low SCA scores, the presence of indiscipline for whatever reason, or the inability to manage it, high absenteeism, and low levels of school achievement, academic achievement, predict violence in schools. And trauma has become a big thing, like I said, a book that has become extremely popular. It was written or published several years ago, but it's in the context of trauma around the world and in the aftermath of COVID, it's become quite popular. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. It's by a psychiatrist called Bessel van der Kolk, who is initially Dutch but works in the States, in Boston. And in The Body Keeps the Score, he talks about the effect of trauma. And I put the whole passage on the slide because I think it really speaks to a lot of the issues that we face. She says, children living in the inner city, exposed frequently to the use of drugs, guns, and random violence. They witness injury, they witness suffering and death, and they respond to these events with fear and grief, often experiencing dramatic ruptures in their development. The list of psychological reactions is long and grim. Now, he talks about children in a city, and of course, because they're developing, their brains are more pliable and more adult brains, but those things apply to adults as well. And this constant exposure we have to violence, to sometimes severe forms of violence of all sorts, is also creating psychological reactions in us and making us more vulnerable to a range of mental health outcomes. But what comes next is really the critical thing. He talks about hatred for self, profound loss of trust in the community. Remember we said how important that was as a component of mental health. And the world, because you feel the world is a terrible place. Tattered, internalized moral values. In other words, their ability to understand right from wrong, good from bad, becomes compromised. And the ethics of caring and a breaking down of the inner and outer sense of security and of reality. And of course, they're particularly vulnerable to traumatic stress illnesses. So in other words, we're living in a society, because of all the violence, where it's being perpetuated and continually reinforced by the presence of the same violence. And that's why it's so important for us to really commit to addressing it. So again, one thing leading to another, Ministry of Education again, SE results. They have results, of course, on an ongoing basis. I didn't want to look at the post-COVID results, which are worse than this, but these are results in 2019 and 2020. 63% of children scored over 50%. That means 37% scored under 50%. And I don't know how many of you know how many children take common entrance. So, but if you think about, let's call it 40%, you see how many children that is. And they're starting off already at a disadvantage. 11% of that 37% scored under 30%. So you're talking then, I think somebody said 80,000? 18?
More than
so, 11% of that is 1,800,
yeah.
a little over 1,800 children. And if that's happening every year, you're talking about several thousand children over time who are already starting at a disadvantage. Mean English language writing score was 56. And the mean math score was 52, or 52.9, which is 53. So this is overall now. So it means that even with the overall score, we're talking about people who are compromised. And remember, we said that for school violence, USC results was a predictor according to the ministry. So that's one target of intervention right there. How do we help these children who are unable to, and this of course, the SE exam has its issues, but these children who are scoring these low marks are particularly vulnerable, especially in a society that doesn't allow or cater for their weaknesses and reasons why they might be scoring so low. So this is an international paper published in 2014, again saying that school violence was associated with those same things. Low educational attainment, a range of negative mental and physical health outcomes, and includes violence not just between the students, but violence in the students who exercise against that. So this is an old slide, comes out of England. So conduct disorder is the psychiatric condition that describes children who are behaving in ways that are against the natural social order. And they compare, this is a health economics unit, they compare children with no problems, children with conduct problems, and children who are diagnosed with conduct disorder. And you see that crime is the biggest result or the biggest outcome of this diagnosis. Lost employment, problems with relationships, the need for foster residential care, of course health issues, and education issues, and the cost of all of this is in euros. So this is the cost to society. And as you see, the children conduct disorder, this is cost over time to the child is as much as 120,000 euros. So if you add, going back to our SCA children, those who are struggling and those who are developing conduct problems, I mean, obviously the costs will be different, but you can see how significant those costs are. And we keep coming back to those points all the time. So I want to argue that maternal mental health, childhood social and mental disorders, education, substance use, and the absence of social and community support are at the base of all these problems. And one of my former students, and this is a slide I showed then in 2015 as well, because we were seeing a lot of conduct disorders, she did a study identifying the risk factors for conduct disorder. And again, you see she identified socioeconomic status, family structure, deviant peer association, male gender, and permissive parenting styles. So parental issues, peer issues, family structure, and socioeconomic status. And this kind of summarizes the problems. I say is the horseman of the apocalypse. And education, mental health, and social family health, I think are the riders of these, the horses that these horsemen are riding. So, understanding why children don't do well in primary school, there's a study coming out of Europe, and what they found that these were the maternal factors that contributed to below average primary school performance. Prematurity, so this is a birth issue, psychiatric diagnosis in the mother, pre and postnatal depression, and we found here that 25% of women, both in Mount Hope and San Fernando General Hospital, have postpartum depression. So that's 1 in 4. And there are all kinds of implications so that most of them unrecognized. Substance use in the mother, general health, uncontrolled diabetes, things like epilepsy, and again, exposure to violence and stress. So you see why it's a kind of circular thing. So the mothers being exposed to these things are having children who are struggling in primary school. These children who are struggling in primary school are then getting into trouble. And of course, that trouble continues to evolve as they grow older. Life expectancy. Now, life expectancy is something that is a measure that we use to kind of determine the health of a country. And again, just looking at the Americas, you see that the non-Latin Caribbean has the lowest life expectancy among the 4 groups. North America has the highest, Latin America has the second highest, Central America is the 3rd, and we're in 4th place. So it means that all these problems that we have are contributing to the overall health of the society by us having a lower life expectancy than the rest of the region. So CARFA, Caribbean Public Health Agency, they did a study, and of course the work that they've been doing was among the work that led the Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, to talk about violence as a public health problem, because they found that crime, violence, injuries, accidents, violence to self and other were the leading cause of death in the under 44 age group in the Caribbean. And that is one of the things that is lowering our life expectancy. The other fascinating thing, as we see, this is also a repeated statistic, that males are dying far more than females. It applies to homicide, it applies to suicide, and it applies to accidents, and it also applies to the so-called NCDs, the non-communicable chronic diseases. So in 2005, we did a study on homicide victims, and this is what we found: low marriage rates, African ethnicity, school dropout rates. Again, that issue with education. Firearm being the most common means, and of course males more than females. And then we recently, Daniel Francois, another student, and I upgraded it. And again, what we found in that study in 2005 was that homicide and suicide were both high in Trinidad, but they were kind of inverted. So most of the homicides occurred in the northeast and the east, less so in south and south central, whereas the suicides occurred in the south and south central. And I heard the mayor just now talk about somebody in Parkade, wanting to commit suicide. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a while. But suicide is associated with low population density, low income, East Indian ethnicity, alcohol consumption. So you find that both ethnic groups have these problems. On one hand, homicide victims, on the other, suicide. So nobody is exempt. And then we looked at suicide again, all the suicides that occurred between 2000 and 2016. And the critical thing here, again, you see that the southwestern area accounted for most of the suicides. But what the trend that was disturbing was that, again, about 20 years ago, we looked at suicide in the country, and 80% of the people who committed suicide did it by swallowing poison. Ramoxone, as it used to be called, paraquat, more technical name. But what has been happening, and we've been looking at suicide over the last 5 years, including during the pandemic, is that hanging is now competing with pesticide poisoning as the leading cause, the leading means of death. And I think that reflects the violence that is in the society. So that people even killing themselves are now choosing more violent means. And that is also a sign of the distress that I referred to in the society. The other thing that distinguishes here is high rates of murder-suicide, which you might expect given that we have high rates of homicide and suicide. And again, history of depression, mental health problems, substance use, alcohol in particular, a history of intimate partner violence, and again, looking at the review, we found they were average of 4 per year between 2000 and 2010 and 2018, which the average around the region is about 1 a year. So again, our rates are substantially higher. And to underline the degree of distress that our children are experiencing, UNICEF in 2019 looked at children in the Eastern Caribbean, including Trinidad, although they described it as Eastern Caribbean, and they found that 23% of the 13 to 15-year-old age group had suicidal ideation, 14% had engaged in self-harm or attempted suicide in the past year, and again, the fertility rate, meaning the rate of teenage pregnancies, was 31 per thousand. Again, the international average is about 12 per thousand, and it's another feature of that issue of the challenges that young, now females face in the context of all the educational issues we referred to before. So, we're in the middle of, as I said, doing this study in South, and let's go back to that. And what we found is that in 2014 there were 24 suicides. In 2021 there were 62. So there has been quite an increase, and we're processing the data to work out what is contributing to those numbers. There was also a World Values Survey, so this refers to trust now. So this is a group that does, they go around the world, they pick countries and they ask people questions. So like, can most people be trusted? And in Trinidad, 3% of people said yes, the group average was 29%. Confidence in the police in Trinidad is 20%, group average was 64%. Confidence in justice systems and believe that people would take advantage of you. And you see, one of them in Trinidad, there's this sense that the institutions don't work in the way that people would like, and there's also the personal sense that you can't trust people and that people are going to take advantage of you. And again, in low trust societies, you have problems with mental health. Randy C. Prasad is a colleague of mine on campus in St. Augustine. He did a report for the IDB looking at child sexual abuse in the context of crime and violence. And again, he found that many of the children who had been exposed to crime and violence had also been exposed to sexual abuse, both for those who developed mental health problems and those who didn't develop mental health problems. So the controls would be the people who didn't develop mental health problems, and 12% of them had experienced it, and 20% of those had experienced it with force and manipulation. And he concluded that the prevalence of sexual abuse is much higher than many people assume. So if you marry that with the issues we talked about with education, the issues we talked about substance use, you see we have people who are traumatized, who are vulnerable, and therefore more likely to engage in behavior that either does damage to themselves or does damage to others. Because of all of this work internationally, there's a whole movement behind what is called Adverse Childhood Experiences, ACEs, and they've done longitudinal studies in the States and in England, and again, these adverse childhood experiences are associated with low educational attainment, high risks of depression and drug use, and parental mental health and parental substance use also contributed to outcomes. And child physical and sexual abuse associated with the greatest risk. So you see there's this connection between these adverse experiences, inclusive of physical and sexual abuse, low educational attainment, poor mental health, substance use, and then ultimately violence. So in our work with serious mental illness, we looked at this, we kind of devised this chart to explain how this affects the development of serious mental illness. And of course, there are genetic factors, but we feel that the greatest factors revolve around the experience of social adversity. And this social adversity affects the cognitive development, your motor and your social development. It predisposes you to developing anxiety and depressive symptoms, which in turn lead you to, if you're predisposed in the right kind of environment, or I should say the wrong kind of environment, have social withdrawal and cognitive changes, and eventually to some to develop psychosis. I would also suggest, so this was focused on psychosis, which is what we were interested in, but I would also suggest that this same pattern is what leads to violent behavior. And that violent behavior that is so lacking in apparent moral reference points and no respect for community or indeed for self travels along that same path. Again, repeating the same thing in terms of adolescence, sexual abuse, parental illness, socioeconomic status. And then we did a study in the prison, the Golden Grove prison. And it was fascinating because we tested IQ. And when we sent the results to the people who were doing the kind of quality control, they were saying, but where did this sample come from? And they couldn't believe it was a prison because they thought it was a school for the intellectually disabled. because the average IQ, now normal IQ is around 100. You get a plus 10 or minus 10 for testing, so the range is 90 to 110. The average IQ in the guys who tested was 72. So that tells you, again, this goes back to the fact that most of the young men in prison are compromised. And remember I talked about school dropouts as being a risk factor for being a homicide victim. We've continually repeated the whole thing about low educational attainment, and this is the evidence and admit that in prison, this is a real problem. In addition to this, most of them have problems with literacy as well. I'm going back to Amartya said, it means that that ability to develop their capability is automatically compromised. And specific problems, this is a slide I showed then, showed 8 years ago as well. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, another student looking at students in St. Jude's and St. Michael's, found that 26% of them had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. She compared them with a normal secondary school, where she found that 7.4% had attention deficit disorder. So it gives you a kind of national average. Those schools were Belmont Secondary and St. Joseph's Convent. But interestingly, all the people who had ADHD, they had a family history of incarceration. That was above the average. For the children in St. Jude's, 43%. For the children in normal school, 16%. So again, suggesting that there's this relationship between our mental health problems, diagnosable mental health problems, family history of incarceration, and problems that would require you to go to St. Jude's or St. Michael's. And this is looking at figures from the ADHD Foundation. And again, you see 40 to 60% of these kids with ADHD have a learning disability, but only 14% of them offer teaching support, and 41% of them had significant behavioral problems. And World ADHD Statement, 43% of children with ADHD develop alcohol use disorder in adolescence and young adulthood. ADHD is associated with educational underachievement, acting again, lower quality of life, unemployment, gambling, accidental injuries, obesity, delinquency, suicide, and premature mortality, and even teenage pregnancy. So you see where that circle starts to close with the presence of these disorders and the risk of developing these problems that become societal problems as the children grow up and grow older, particularly when they're not treated. And then we go back to maternal mental health. Maternal mental illness is associated with substandard academic performance in their children, and this disadvantage extends into secondary school. Poor spelling is a particular problem. And again, it means that the treatment of the mother's mental health now is critical to the mental health of these children. Then there's bullying, which has become very important. We've seen a lot more referrals for bullying over the last 10 to 15 years. And again, a former student did a study on bullying, and she found that 57% of the children reporting to child guidance reported some kind of bullying. Physical bullying more common in boys, associated with a history of abuse and a family history of mental health problems, and usually present, again, self-harm and suicidal ideation, aggression, anxiety and depressive symptoms, sleep disturbances, academic difficulties, again, poor concentration and attention. So again, you see the same issues coming up in all these different contexts, but all of them related to the presence of these underlying problems leading to academic underachievement, in addition to a range of behavioral problems, which usually include aggression. And then a study looking at risk factors for delinquency. These were kids now who were in the youth training center in prison, and compared again with normal children in secondary school. And the biggest predictor was low academic achievement. A family history of arrest and criminality, living environment, and it's usually to low self-esteem, drug use, correlating with their academic underachievement. So maternal education and mental health. And again, maternal education is inversely associated with children's mental health, the key component being literacy. And we found, as I said, 25% of mothers giving birth in public hospitals have postpartum depression, 45% of women in that context being exposed to violence, and this includes 31% of women who ever had a partner. Some of them, that 1/3 of them experienced violence. So maternal stress, this explains why maternal stress affects the brain. And this now makes the point about community violence exposure, that violence exposure is negatively associated with school functioning and academic, social, and interpersonal functioning. It's also positively associated with mental health problems, anxiety, depression, and again, aggression and substance use, and positively associated with cognitive and learning problems. So what we talked about before, being constantly exposed to violence in these so-called hotspot communities, these are the effects, which in turn now make these young people predisposed to perpetuate that cycle of violence. And of course, children with ADHD, and that's why I used ADHD as the kind of signal condition, are more likely to engage in community violence and be exposed to community violence. And lots of this issues with physical health, and I brought this in to show that the same issues that predict physical health problems predict mental health problems. And that bottom paragraph, the consequences of obesity, diabetes, and other diet-related NCDs in children especially, means that these kids have a greater risk of experiencing bullying, developing anxiety, discrimination, low self-esteem, social isolation, and depression. And those effects track through to adulthood. So one of the big disorders that arises out of this is major depressive disorder, what people call depression. I do talk about the symptoms, but again, it's the effect. 45% of people with depression, 45% of people who commit suicide meet diagnostic criteria for depression, and it's probably the main cause, estimated to become the main cause of disability-associated life years by 2025. And a review by some colleagues in Barbados, social determinants of depression and suicidal behavior in the Caribbean. Higher among females, problems beginning in early and middle adolescence, again, lower educational attainment, lower income and occupational achievement, less social support, and interestingly, less religious activity. And we've looked at the prevalence of depression here. They're strongly correlated with those non-communicable chronic diseases, again, increased in female gender, low income, single and unsupported women especially, and in adolescents and young adults and older adults. And in my introduction, the Mistress of Ceremonies talked about intrepid. So this is just to underline the other big problem that we're facing that I think is associated with violence, and this is more controversial. But we're doing this study where we're comparing serious mental illness in Chennai in India, Ibadan in Nigeria, and in northeast Trinidad, from Port of Spain to Sangre Grande. And the thing that most distinguishes the cases in Trinidad from the cases in Nigeria and in India is cannabis use. And that cannabis use, as you see, is prevalent in both the cases uncontrolled. And since the decriminalization of cannabis, we've seen an upsurge in admissions to our unit for cannabis-related problems. And this just speaks, kind of describes what we found. Lifetime cannabis users were twice as likely to have a psychotic disorder. Frequent users meaning 1 or 3 times weekly. more likely to have a psychotic disorder. People with high cannabis involvement will, and this is a score in terms of your interaction with either cannabis except for people who use cannabis, but about 10 times is likely to develop psychosis. And if there's no cannabis use, it would prevent 24% of psychotic disorders in Trinidad. So I would also argue that in conjunction with alcohol and other drugs, that is the other fuel for the problems that we face. And again, as I said, it's controversial because it's decriminalized, and there are good reasons for it to be decriminalized, but it is not harmless. And we have to develop programs to help kids who cannot use it, or who, when they use it, develop serious mental illness, or indeed engage in violent behavior and develop other mental health problems. And this is just more data supporting use of cannabis and the development of mental health problems. And this is a researcher from the States who did a study in Barbados and St. Vincent, and he found that heavy chronic cannabis use is associated with psychosis, which is what we just said, but it's also associated with cognitive deficits. And these cognitive deficits, of course, cognition refers to the ability to know and learn and understand things. Those create lower educational attainment. Again, then on the other end of the spectrum, this is the other problem. We have a lot of dementia in the country. Again, if you look at the risk factors at the bottom, low education, depression, diabetes, smoking, and physical activity. The problem of dementia, as we call it now, major neurocognitive disorder, is burgeoning because of the larger numbers of older people and the issues with diabetes and high blood pressure and other chronic diseases. And again, low education is a risk factor for the development of that problem. So I think these are the wider issues that contribute to poor mental health and in turn to violence. The tolerance to violence that we've developed because of all the violence we're exposed to, decreasing social cohesion and family support, disparities in education, economic opportunity, changing gender roles and identities, poor conflict resolution skills, mental health and social services access, and of course access to firearms in the context of the physical violence. So I want to end with, I think, the strategy that we can engage that would help us address this, and that is social support. So you'll see in a lot of slides the absence of social support being a problem, and of course I said in the beginning that being part of a community is a big part of your mental health. So social support technically now refers to the sense of being cared for, having a source of assistance when you need it, and being part of a network of positively interacting people and community. And it's manifested in 4 dimensions. Emotional support, so that's the hand around the shoulder, helping you when you have a problem. Informational support, again, providing appropriate information when needed. Tangible support, helping out materially when needed. And most importantly, esteem support. In other words, making you feel that you matter, making you feel that you're worthy as a human being, and making you feel that this other person appreciates your presence as a human being. And social support has protective, preventative, and therapeutic value, and it enhances resilience. And I think part of the problem that we face is that we've lost or are losing that capacity for social support because our lives have become far too individualized, and community support now has become the exception rather than the rule. Social support in children, and this is stuff that has been researched, the protective factor in mental health. It positively affects self-regulation and efficacy, which is related to education, and enhances trust and reciprocity. Again, managing early psychosis in children and mothers with psychosis. Preventive intervention should include improved cognition, again related to education. Social support, and community cohesiveness. Again, leveraging social support is useful in the prevention of treatment of depression, anxiety, and suicide. Perceived social support protects against depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation in older adolescents transitioning to adulthood. Social support also applies in the elderly, mediates against loneliness, lower mortality and mobility, again enhancing resilience, a better sense of self-reported well-being, better functional outcomes, and a greater sense of life satisfaction and well-being. And this is just a slide talking about providing social support over the long term. And the 4S model of prevention talks about the benefits of social support. We talked about self-esteem earlier, social reputation, in other words, feeling valued. The emotional support overcomes the stigma, and helping you to cope reduces social aggression. And educational mental health, I kind of mentioned that a lot. The purpose of education, John Dewey said education is to prepare you for life, it is life. And of course, in the idea of education as a lifelong learning journey is now, I think, kind of accepted as the way you should look at education. But it builds resilience against adversity, it helps you develop protective factors against mental health problems, and helps you to appreciate when one needs help and have the confidence to seek it. And going back to Sen, again, his work suggested that, like I said, poverty wasn't about money, it's about capability. And these researchers are also suggesting that money is not the issue. We should really be looking towards an economy of well-being and the relationships that they talk about: engagement, satisfaction, positive emotions and meaning, social relationships that allow you to enjoy the tasks of daily living, where rights are protected and being invested in social capital and benefits accruing to the wider society. And in societies where these principles are allowed to flourish, there's increased life expectancy, less inequality. And I think the policies that we pursue have to engage that and not just look at people making more money. Aaron Beck, he's the guy behind what is called cognitive behavior therapy, CBT. And the importance of this is that he says that how we think influences how we feel, and in turn that influences what we do. And in turn, what we do then feeds back on how we think. So it's, again, a two-way relationship, and it's something we have to remember all the time, that we engage in a kind of constant conversation with our environment, how we think impacting on how we interact with the environment, but how the environment speaks back to us, also affecting how we think. So it's important that we send positive energy out in order to receive positive energy, even when we're faced with the issues related to trauma and all the violence that we've been talking about. And I'll end here with Maslow's hierarchy, which is a kind of fundamental approach to understanding the challenges of life. And of course, at the base of the hierarchy, you can't see it very well. The basic needs refer to your physiological needs: food, shelter, and then as you go up, the psychological needs become more important. And at the top of it, and this is what he feels would be the things that make you transcend, would be your self-fulfillment needs. And this goes back to Amartya Sen, it goes back to the definition of mental health, meaning that the aim of our lives is to optimize our well-being, and not just for us, but for the communities around us. So, the focus must be to put people first, value people. When you put people first, they feel empowered to show up as their best selves. They are supported in terms of maximizing their potential, and we talked about that in the context of mental health, and of course in doing that they excel in their roles. And my last slide is about juicers. So, at the turn of the 20th century, people didn't used to make juice. They used to suck fruits. But then people realized that there was a technological way to extract the juice from the fruit. And a juicer was invented, and of course juicers have evolved over time, and now we have all kinds of fancy machinery to make juice, crushing all kinds of stuff in record time. But the point of this slide is that no matter how good the technology is, if the fruit isn't good, the juice won't be good. And therefore, no matter how much technology we have, no matter how far advanced we go, if we don't treat our people well, the technology will be wasted and the result will be bad tasting juice. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much for that educating, exhilarating, educational lecture, Professor Gerard Hutchinson. Thank you so very much. And remember, please let us be good juicers, okay? Go home and check your Proctor Silex, your blender, your Ninja, and make sure that we are good juicers. So let's give them another round of applause. Thank you so very much, sir. You look so younger in person than on this picture here. And now we would like to invite all the men to stand in the audience, please. Thank you so much. I was asked to ask all the men to please stand up. Please stand up. Oh, I think you guys are getting a surprise tonight. For being such lovely pillars of society, whether at home, at school, at work, in your community. White roses symbolizes purity, innocence, youthfulness. We thank you, we salute you, all the men that are here tonight. We really appreciate you. Thank you so very much. So let's give all the men a hearty round of applause. Thank you so much. You may have your seats now. Thank you. And now, moving along, we have a cultural item by our very own. We have our very own local baron, Mr. Wendell McBurney. Let's welcome him as he comes on stage.
Yeah, go ahead. Don't study me. Is mental health we talking about? Good evening, everybody. We just, lighten up the thing a little bit. I was here before on this same floor, trying to party, but in vain. Here I am once more on a higher tone. I wait and train to come again. Now I go Ready for challenge, I'm laying myself inside. Hey, hit it. You're and it came to pass for the second time. I only dance so, not like before. I'm gonna play a mask when I deal with you. Nothing is time is something. Now I get to know, I carry on. Already full of it, already full jamming. Hey. Yeah. Nice. How to break the ice with that one then. One of my favorite. Now, what is Wendell McBurney? La Proche's a stage name, a performing name. That is French for the next, right? That is where you come from. La Proche, right? Let me do a little thing for the season. Hey, eat it. Day, I don't see it. Day, every time I ask you to come down, day and night I hear you sing more songs. Big one, don't go with the boys. Before I hit the door, I'm making noise. Well, this year trying something new. I stay home with you. All the chores are the things to do. But I am done in conflict because I'm so passionate. So when they come for me, I want you to go with me. Then you will see all the characters. right? In fact, we make it right outside the foyer, right in front of the auditorium and things there. So all the chorus is busting up. Right? So that is all they have to sing for. Right? So this is my new contribution for this year. There we go. We already have no point that they look for the we just say so we don't need to, right? It's Christmas time, come on in. We wasn't that like one all and it was friends. Slowly coming here from here. We coming to drink and eat out everything. Office staff already know. That is how the jingles go. Cause we are real right here for some. Early morning we on the phone. We bustin' out. Ham, chicken and duck. We bustin' out. And of course we have a turkey. We bustin' out. I get a run from the deputy. All these times you see them coming. When you ask the telephone, I invite them. And he wants to stop a all over the comfort is real food you're smelling. No contribution to the fun. Everybody right the top, but food still sharing not snap. In the yard or in the hall, everybody having a ball. We cooking up any dish. Them girls bringing something. We go
Let's give him a round of applause. We got party in the engine room. Bossa cook in the people walk. Oh my, oh my. So now I'd just like to call on Ms. Champa de Matasaran to do a presentation for our guest speaker. Also, and I'd also like to call Ms. Mills Samara too, please. Thank you. We would like to present the professor with a gift on behalf of SFCC for gracing us with your presence, your intellect, all your hard work you are doing for our country, our community, in the field of psychiatry. We thank you so very much. So we welcome you on stage.
To express our sincerest gratitude for that very informative lecture that you delivered here this afternoon. We're going to present you with a small token for our appreciation.
Also open the floor if there's anyone who would like to ask the professor any questions, comments, feel free, or you can either meet him after the program has ended, any other vital information that you would require. Yes? Okay. All right, so thank you so very much, Dr. Hutchinson, Professor Gerald Hutchinson, thank you so much. So we would like all the members of council, your worship, the mayor, the deputy mayor, all our councillors that are present here to please stand. And we have a little something for you guys too. I would like to invite the Dr. Gajala, as well as Mr. Ashraf Ali, to come and present our very hard-working councillors and mayor thus far. You know, we really love and appreciate you being here, and we would like you to have this on behalf of Public Health Department. Yes. So you guys can grace us with your presence on the stage. Thank you so much. His worship, dear Mayor, Mr. Robert Paris. I have to make sure I get names correct. Thank you so very much, sir. Let's welcome also the Deputy Mayor, Alderman, Deputy Mayor, Ms. Patricia Alexis. Thank you so very much. And we have the head and convener of the Public Health Committee, Ms. Teresa Lynch. Also, we have one of the newest members. All I know is Mr. Ali Booker. Sorry. Thank you so very much. Okay, welcome. And I know this name, Mr. Naigon. Thank you so very much for being here. We would also like to include our lovely Deputy Mayor, our lovely Deputy CEO. Sorry, there's so many deputies up in here, I can't remember all of them. Thank you so much, Ms. Heather Crawford. We'd also like to call Ms. Georgiana. something nice this evening for being such a lovely lady.
Here, get to know.
We'd also like to call Mr. Sicharan to the stage. Thank you so much. He's one of the attorneys attached to SFCC as well. Mr. Michael Johnson. Hi. And also Mr. Marcus Kadari. Those are past councillors with us. Thank you so very much for being here. You see, you get roses and you get gifts. It's a good thing you come. We also like to include and invite Miss Allison. Oh, Miss Manager, yes, you. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for all your help, your support, and one of our very own retired but still functioning Mr. Jamil Mohammed. Thank you so much for being here with us this evening. I'm going to make sure I don't forget anybody. See no kind of finger pointing at me. Also, the other Dr. Gajala, yes? Yes, it was fun. Oh, Dr. Naro, sorry. Please accept my apology. Thank you so much for being here with us this evening. Okay. So you guys get to stand center stage when you make the presentation. So Miss Candice, lovely lady in red, thank you so much for being here with us this evening. We really appreciate you guys, all your hard work, your dedication towards SFCC, San Fernando City Corporation. Okay, I just have to make sure I don't forget anybody. Go on, Mrs. Ali. Hi, good evening. Please feel free to grace the stage with your presence. We have a little token for you as well. This is our acting PHI 4's wife. He didn't want to give us, so he gave the doctor to give up. Thank you so much. Okay, so, right, so remember when you guys came in and you registered, you were gotten these little programs. So we have 2-door prizes. 2-door prizes, right? So on the front of your program, if you just double check it, there's 2 smiley faces, actually a sad one and a happy one. So those are 2-door prizes. So if you have the lucky program with the faces, please feel free to come up on the stage. Okay, and they're checking. And they're checking. Ah, we have a winner. We have a winner. Yes, you can come and we'll verify it for you. Okay, so that's one. And there's supposed to be another one. Yes, please feel free to come to the stage. Yes, he did get the smiley face, yes. Center stage. Sue, for being such patient, humble, lovely people in the audience this evening, distinguished guests. We offer you this token of love and appreciation. And we have come to the end of our program tonight, but before we would like to thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you so much, Mr. Ashraf Ali will be doing the vote of thanks this evening. So take it away, Mr. Ali. Okay, and he's going away now. Okay, ready for the speech. So thank you so very much, everyone. Mr. Ali.
His Worship the Mayor, Councillor Robert Paris, Mayor of the City of San Fernando, Deputy Mayor Ms. Patricia Alexis, Deputy Chief Executive Officer Ms. Heather Crawford, Professor Hutchinson, Dr. Navarro, CMOH, City of Hollis, Spain, Dr. Gujala, CMOH, San Fernando City Corporation, members of Council, former members of Council, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I stand before you today to express my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you for making the 18th annual lecture on mental health violence and injury prevention a resounding success. First and foremost, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to His Worship the Mayor, Councillor Robert Paris, and the esteemed councillors for their unwavering support in making this event possible. Your assistance in providing the venue for this gathering is deeply appreciated. I would also like to express my gratitude to CEO and Deputy CEO for their collaboration, guidance, and generous allocation of the budget. Your unwavering support has been instrumental throughout the entire planning and execution process, contributing greatly to the success of this event. We are honored to have had Professor Hutchinson grace our stage and share his brilliant discourse on psychiatry and mental health. His lifelong commitment to this field has left an indelible impact on all of us. We extend our deepest thanks for enlightening us with your knowledge, insights during this momentous occasion. I would also like to thank all the individuals who perform all the cultural items. Furthermore, I would like to offer my heartfelt thanks to our esteemed CMH, Dr. Kavi Mudari Gajala, and our public health educator, Ms. Meena Jadunanan, and Ms. Kelsey Thompson, our administrative secretary, for all the hard work, dedication, and invaluable time spent in making this event a success. Through your contribution, you have shed light on the importance of mental health violence prevention and injury prevention, and we are immensely grateful. I would also like to show our profound appreciation to all heads of department, dedicated members of staff, especially invited guests, representatives from the media, for your unwavering commitment and hard work, which have played an integral role in bringing this event to fruition. Your presence here today is a testament to your dedication to the betterment of our society, and we extend our heartfelt thanks for your invaluable contributions. I would like to end by making a simple quote. Always remember you are strong, you are beautiful, you are resilient, you are loved, you are capable of overcoming any obstacle. Tomorrow is a new day. Beauty and strength comes from within, so keep on smiling. A beautiful day begins with a beautiful mindset. When you wake up, take a second to think about what a privilege it is to wake up alive and healthy. May God continue to bless all of us and guide us safely back to our homes. Thank you and good night.
Thank you so very much, everyone. Remember to be a brother's keeper, to be kind to one another. We don't know what they're going through. And thank you so very much for this evening. Before you all leave, please feel free to exit to the back. There's like refreshments for everyone. Reach home safe. God bless you and keep you until the next appointed time. Good night, everybody, and we thank you so very much. And I think you guys deserve a round of applause for yourselves. Thank you so much. Good night and God bless.
Got you.